extremely heated and extremely emotional right now, and this video is specifically to Anthony Padilla, who I fucking loved, admired, respected. He is the one person, one YouTuber, aside from like Shane and like the people that are my friends, he's the one YouTuber that I wasn't like friends with or had any prior connection to that I was like, that guy is so sweet. I met him at YouTubers React one time and I was like, you know what, he had prior, like, I'm sorry, I'm like just really like heated, and it's not just about him, it's about like other things, but anyways. And I met him at YouTubers React and we were sitting across from each other, and this was, I don't know, a year or two ago, and he was so kind and so nice and introduced himself and wasn't one of those YouTubers who didn't act like he didn't know who I was and vice versa. It was just very sweet and very nice. And you know, a lot of people have preconceived notions about me, that I'm this crazy bitch and all this stuff like that, and I make videos about people. Here's the thing, in case you guys haven't noticed, I don't make videos about people who don't. I make videos about me and my journey and my struggles and my mental health struggles, and I think it's apparent to everybody that has watched me for some time that I have a lot of mental health issues and I have a lot of struggles with mental illness. And I've struggled with it my entire life. People love to point it out on the internet constantly, and then the minute I open up about it, I'm shitted on and I'm told, no, you're not. Case in point, Anthony Padilla. Fuck you, Anthony. Fuck you for pretending to be some sort of mental health advocate, to be a spokesperson for mental health and depression. Money, you look good. You don't look like you have depression. Fuck you, Anthony Padilla. I don't care if this gets fucking demonetized. Fuck you. You were someone I respected so much because you talked about depression and anxiety and you had all this like spotlight and stuff like that. So fuck you, and fuck you for like acting like some sort of white knight. Claiming you have dissociative identity disorder is not cool excuse to mock people in the community and call them crazy.
Uploaded a video called Meet My Alters, Dissociative Identity Disorder. Before I even get into telling you guys what this video is about, just keep in mind that Trisha Paytas has a history of uploading highly uneducated and offensive videos just to get a reaction out of people. Although this video kind of took things a little bit too far. In Trisha's video, she talks about how she's self-diagnosed herself with dissociative identity disorder, also known as DID for short. The first sign that this video was going to be horribly uneducated was the fact that Trisha admits to self-diagnosing herself from home. The entire video is her talking about her different alters and explaining how she gained them. Trisha claims she borrows others' personalities and never really formed her own personality. She says she acts like whoever she's around and changes her personality to fit theirs, which leads her to believe that she has DID, enough to make a whole entire video about it. In reality, what Trisha explains isn't actually DID. Conforming to others' personalities isn't DID. To make matters even worse, in Trisha's video, she calls a YouTuber who actually has DID crazy.
Like, I watched the Anthony Padilla one, and there's a girl, DissocialDID or something, I think his name, she's British, and like, I watched it and I was like, oh, like, she seems crazy.
That YouTuber actually ended up responding to Trisha in a very respectful video, calling her out for spreading misinformation and damaging a community that herself and other DID YouTubers have worked hard to educate people on.
That the content that's being produced at the moment around dissociative identity disorder is scientifically accurate, and that it is not stigmatizing, and that it isn't going to damage our community or damage the lives or the reputations of the people who live with it, just like we do.
Trisha's video currently sits at over 25,000 dislikes and it's still going. The comments are also very negative towards Trisha. Here's what people had to say. DID is literal hell, not just some fun quirky thing. Constantly having to try to piece together basic aspects of your life, PTSD flashbacks, alters fighting all the time because they want/need different things, sometimes not even being able to remember your own legal name or age or even where you live. This is incredibly damaging to people who actually have DID. Do the world a favor and take this video down and educate yourself before addressing thousands of people. A YouTuber named Anthony Padilla recently made a really informative video on DID. He actually took to Instagram to respond to Trisha and said, "Claiming you have DID is not a cool excuse to mock people in the community and call them crazy. You can watch my video to learn about DID from people who have DID and actually know what they're talking about."
I watched the Anthony Padilla one, and there's a girl, DissocialDID or something, I think his name, she's British, and like I watched it and I was like, oh, like she seems crazy, but I know that's like what I
Trisha's obviously not very educated on this subject or has misunderstood. It's hard to sit here and watch somebody, one, call me crazy and spread information that's very incorrect and damaging about our community, which undoes a lot of the hard work that me and a lot of other content creators in the DID community have done. It's a group effort, and it's hard to sit here and watch somebody who has such a huge reach spread such damaging information. And I'm not sure that Trish really understands how damaging this is. All these things are completely wrong. Scientifically, they are wrong. I don't know if I can get through this whole thing.
Welcome to my scientifically informed insider look at mental health topics. If you find this video to be interesting or helpful, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Hello, this is Dr. Grande. Today's question asks if I can offer a critique of this video that was released by Trisha Paytas talking about dissociative identity disorder. I'll refer to this disorder as DID. An important note here, Trisha Paytas, of course, is a real person, so I'm not diagnosing anybody in this video. I'm only speculating about what could be happening in a situation like this. So in this video, we see that Trisha Paytas is discussing how she self-diagnosed with two disorders: multiple personality disorder and dissociative identity disorder. Trisha is popular on YouTube. I'm not exactly sure what she does, and I've never actually watched any of her videos until this video on DID, and I also watched the video she released after this. I'm accustomed to addressing fairly technical mental health topics and offering critiques of opinions or positions that have some elements that are correct and some elements that may be a bit off. Now, I realize that Trisha is not running a channel about mental health or scientific evidence or anything like that. However, if a content creator is going to talk about a topic that can impact how people understand mental health, it would seem there's a basic responsibility to read something, look for credible sources for information before making a video, and to interpret information correctly. But that's just my opinion. As I offer a critique of this video, it would actually be easier to talk about what was correct as opposed to what was unclear or incorrect. But either way, it was actually quite painful to watch and disturbing in terms of the impact it could have on people looking for information about DID. So first I'll give a summary here of DID and look at the arguments around the disorder, and then critique the specific video released by Trisha Paytas on DID. I can't think of another mental disorder more controversial than dissociative identity disorder. There are many arguments in favor of the disorder being an actual disorder and arguments saying that it doesn't exist. And I'll talk about that in a few moments. Looking at the definition of the disorder from the DSM, I'll go through the quick version here. We see a disruption of identity characterized by two or more distinct personality states. Sometimes these states are referred to as alters. These alters may have different perceptions, memories, behavior, and thinking. The most important part of this particular criterion is the use of the term personality states and not the term personality. So we're really not talking about additional personalities, rather personality states. Now, the next criterion has to do with amnesia. We see gaps in recall of everyday events and gaps in recall for traumatic events. So this is a critical part of DID. This is actually used when trying to detect individuals who are faking the disorder. People who are faking about DID often talk about alters, but fail to report amnesia. The last criterion I'll cover is what's referred to as clinically significant distress. So if somebody has the symptoms of DID, but it's not really causing dysfunction, they wouldn't be diagnosed with the disorder. This is another key criterion that is used to distinguish people who actually have it from people who are faking the disorder. So now that's the definition. Let's take a look at the quick history of the disorder. It's actually fairly interesting how this disorder developed. We see that DSM-1, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual version 1, that was published in 1952, featured what was referred to as dissociated or multiple personality. DSM-2, released in 1968, featured hysterical neurosis, dissociative type. DSM-3, which came out in 1980, had the first use of multiple personality disorder. And then 14 years later, with DSM-4, we see that category is changed to dissociative identity disorder. And of course, it was maintained in DSM-5, which was published in 2013. So why did we see this change from multiple personality disorder to DID? Well, originally the disorder was conceptualized as somebody having too many personalities, right? So one is optimal, and more than one is likely to lead to problems. Now it's conceptualized as a lack of a single unified identity, not the presence of multiple identities. So that's kind of the history of the disorders. So now looking at this video by Trisha Paytas. So I'm going to go through this video item by item and point out what didn't make sense to me in terms of what we see in the scientific literature and from my clinical experience. So the first point here in this video, we see that Trisha is self-diagnosing. So I can stop it right there. This is always a bad idea. It's not just a lack of technical knowledge that makes this a bad idea, it's a lack of perspective. Sometimes it's a good idea to have a professional who is objective and has proper training looking at one situation to determine what's going on. It kind of bypasses the lack of insight component that we sometimes see with mental disorders. So the next point really builds on this self-diagnosis statement. So we see here that Trisha diagnosed herself with both multiple personality disorder and dissociative identity disorder, indicating that there are some differences. In the next video she did, she really doubled down on this idea that these are two different disorders. I think this was really one of the most controversial statements she made because a lot of people have opinions about this statement. But to be clear here, they are technically two different disorders. One is no longer a diagnosable disorder. Multiple personality disorder is gone. Again, it was banned when the DSM-4 was published in 1994. DID was the replacement for multiple personality disorder, and DID is a bit different. For example, it expanded amnesia to everyday events and not just areas around trauma. So it's a little bit like hypochondriasis and somatic symptom disorder. Yes, they are two different disorders technically, but somebody wouldn't be diagnosed with both because the former is no longer diagnosable, right? So this kind of shows that maybe she didn't understand that DID was the replacement for multiple personality disorder. It didn't add to it. Both aren't out there eligible for diagnosis. The next point, Trisha indicates that dissociating comes in different forms than the alters. So the current conceptualization of the alters is that they are dissociated states. So I'm not really sure what she's talking about here. It seems clear she's trying to describe something. It's just impossible to know what that is. There wouldn't be alters without dissociation. It's literally in the name, dissociative identity disorder, right? So it's a key part of the disorder. Now, the next point is just something I found interesting. It's really not particularly important. When she said she didn't want to scare people, I thought to myself, too late, right? That just popped in my head. It's not the DID that's scary. It's the lack of knowledge that we see expressed here that's downright frightening. Next point, Trish indicates that the alters are assisting the primary personality, which she refers to as Trish. I guess because that's her name, that makes sense. So it's almost like she's describing the alters like they get together and have meetings, like they're on a committee or something. I don't know. I've never seen alters described that way. Alters aren't enjoyable. They're not usually conceptualized as helpful. Like they come in and get together and advise the primary personality, right? So that's just an unusual description of DID alters. The next point, Trish, in a sense, holds the alters responsible for some of her behavior. Now, I'm not judging the behavior. I'm simply noting what she's saying in the situation. She says that the alters have caused failed relationships. She says one of the alters can't stop eating. This type of characterization is really one of the criticisms that researchers have of the construct of DID, allowing somebody to place blame on an alternate personality. Now, this may be her experience. I'm not saying this isn't happening to her. I'm just pointing out how some may react to this type of characterization. Trish indicates that she doesn't consider the DID to be a problem or an issue. She says maybe it's just her imagination and she's being creative. Well, by definition, DID does cause clinically significant distress. I talked about that before. In her follow-up video, to be fair, she does portray her experiences as much more distressing, right? So I'm not sure why that wasn't mentioned in the first video, but either way, she does say that later on. My last thought here, generally in this video, we just see kind of a stream of consciousness. It's impressionistic, like talking about something without any detail, just talking in a seemingly random and disorganized way. I don't think this is very useful. I guess it has some entertainment value. I'm not really sure, but it certainly doesn't have any educational value.
Dear Anthony Padilla.
And it went like...
You, Anthony Padilla. You. What the did you watch, you dumb little boy?
I feel what I go through, what I struggle with, what I deal with, what I'm tortured with, is like why other people care so much. I made one comment about a YouTuber that has made multiple videos on me, and the whole world hates me. I responded to Anthony and his girlfriend by mocking me, rolling their eyes at my first video about TID. I have talked about this in so many videos, and I know someone could find them somewhere. I talked about it on a show I did for reals called It Happened Here. I talked about my DID. I've talked about this with so many people in my personal life. And it's just shocking the amount of hate. I just posted on Instagram this morning, this is right. There's a business book that I got you to because why? I don't see how this isn't obvious to other people that there's something seriously wrong with me and that I suffered serious trauma as a child that I've never, ever talked about. I think telling my boyfriends and that's about it, like serious boyfriend. I just don't get like how me talking about my mental health, my journey, what I've been told, what I've read, what I feel is so upsetting to other people.
Today, but other doctors and a lot, it is just the flu, and like, yes, the flu can kill anybody, those with weakened immune systems, older people, people with pre-existing health conditions. So logic would tell me, okay, those people should stay home and quarantine. Look, I don't mind quarantine. I keep getting lots of all the crumbs in my crotch, but I'm back to self-quarantine pretty much my entire life. I mean, I got to eat, but that's about it. I don't do that much activity, like socializing. But to sit down restaurants, I mean, it's crazy. It's like, is this going to be gone in 2 weeks? No. What I heard is like July. But it is a flu where, like, if you do get it, you're not going to die. And again, if you're older, you're susceptible at higher risk. So I'm like, oh, well, what's the cure? And literally everyone I talked to that's informed is like, well, it's just a flu, it just goes away.
Yo, that's classy.
What's that supposed to be about?